Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Village of Lytton's Committee of the Whole meeting on January 6, 2026. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to please turn off your videos, mute your microphones, and please note that this meeting is being recorded, but it is not being live streamed. Thank you, Your Worship. You may call the meeting to order.
Thank you. So I'm going to call this first Committee of the Whole meeting of 2026 to order at 10:59 a.m. We're a minute early, which is fine. I want to begin by recognizing that we're meeting on the territory of our friends and neighbors, the Metlakatlan people. And today in the hall, we have Councillor Toss and Anne, as well as myself, and we're joined by Councillor Michelle and Councillor Lightfoot online. We also have Acting Deputy Corporate Officer Kathy Walters, who's here in that capacity in accordance with our council procedure bylaw. So we will begin with adoption of the agenda, but please, as we move this agenda and we move into the agenda, that this meeting is for the purpose of discussion, clarification, gaining understanding based on information that's presented both verbally and in our package, in our report, and that, of course, there's no final decision making at this meeting. But I do require a motion to adopt this agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. Seconder? Toss? Councillor Toss? Thank you. And all those in favor? Aye. Carried. We will move to we have the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting that we held on December the 2nd. So we need to adopt those minutes. And moved by?
I'll move that too.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. Seconder? Councillor Michelle. Were there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Aye. Carried. Now we move to item number 5, public comment, and I will turn it back over to Corporate Officer Storchy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So members of the public are now invited to comment on matters related to the agenda. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. You can find that by clicking on React at the bottom of your screen and then click Raise Hand. When it's your turn, I'll read your name and you'll be asked to unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Speakers are asked to please state and spell your name and say your address. If anyone would like to speak, please use the raise hand function now. I'll call for a second time. If anyone would like to speak, please use the raise hand function now. Not seeing anyone online, Your Worship. Is there anyone at Parish Hall?
No, there's nobody at the hall other than us today.
All right, so thank you. That completes the public comment portion of the meeting. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So we'll move right on to item number 6, which is our staff reports. And we are here today, of course, for a specific purpose and specific discussion. And I am going to turn it over to CAO Montbriquet.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to have a bit of a discussion and run through some calculations related to property taxes. Lisa, if you would bring up the presentation, that would be helpful. Just to start out, though, to remind everybody, let everyone know, this discussion is really is conceptual in nature. These numbers are none of the numbers for 2026 are final. They're all going to change from here on. The only numbers that are in the discussion that are final are the historical ones. And but we're really just talking today about a couple of different scenarios around property taxes, and I have used some numbers in order to illustrate the concepts. But just so nobody gets too fixated on any one number, as you know, in the discussion, they're all going to change going forward. So I just want to kind of say that at the outset. So you can flip to the first slide, Lisa. This discussion is around the municipal property taxes only. So this is the portion that is collected by the village to cover the village operations. So as you know, we also collect taxes on behalf of a number of other organizations. And historically, when we've calculated our tax rates, often those other organizations, the combined amount that we collect for them is actually more than our taxes. So it's just something to keep in mind, because there's a total tax burden to our residents that isn't reflected by any of this discussion, because we're just talking about the municipal portion at this point. Again, just to remind everybody, we've talked about this before. The municipal property taxes are calculated by taking the assessed value that's determined by BC assessment, dividing it by 1,000, and multiplying it by the mill rate or the tax rate. Those two phrases can be used interchangeably, mill rate and tax rate. We're talking about the same thing, but that's how we calculate our municipal taxes. So the assessed value, we don't have any control over. That comes from BC assessment. The formula of dividing by 1,000 is not changeable either. The mill rate or the tax rate is the one piece of it that we do make decisions about. And what I'd like to do today is outline a couple of different ways that we could consider how we're going to set the 2026 tax rate. As again, the municipal budget, we're required to balance that every year. So the revenue plus any transfers that we make from reserves must equal the expenditures and any transfers that we make out to reserves. So at our December committee of the whole meeting, we did look at just a very preliminary expenditure budget. And so those expenditures will all need to be recovered by the revenue that's generated by the municipality or by the village. So you can go to the next slide, Lisa. So a couple of the assumptions that are kind of baked into what we're going to look at today. And when we had our committee of the whole meeting in December, we looked at the budget of expenditures, and the total expenditures at that time, a very draft basis, was based on about $928,000. Of that amount, we do receive a small community grant that's intended to help offset some of those operating expenditures. And the remaining amount that needs to be covered by municipal property taxes or other sources is $518,158. So that's the number that we're using today as kind of the target amount that needs to be raised in 2026.
Can I ask?
Excuse me, Councilor CIO Mavrikat. Do you have a
quick
clarification?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So the new construction added to the assessment roll, the 4.1 million and 2.3 million in business. That is anticipated, like the AG store and the residential dwellings came to 4.1 million in 2025-26. I'm sorry, I just don't know where that, like, what does that represent?
Yeah, that's a little bit further on, but that is the new construction that has occurred in the
So
village.
It's already happened. It includes the Legion and everything else. And that's numbers pulled from BC assessment.
And sorry, that number is?
Those numbers were pulled from BC assessment.
Though that information is given to BC assessment by the village through the building permit process. And then
the value of the build, because the permit is a portion of that. So you have that number. I see.
Yeah, BC assessment gave us preliminary numbers to that effect. I actually just was able to pull today the 2026 roll totals. So I have new numbers that I'll share when I get to that that section.
Okay, and then one other point of clarification from the last slide. I'm sorry. You mentioned that we're not discussing the taxes collected for, say, the RCMP or the school board, correct?
Correct.
So is that, though, at the end of this discussion, those numbers, like whatever that, 1,300, let's say, projected taxes for a property in 2026, that will be higher because of those other taxes to be collected on behalf of others? Thank you.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I forgot. I was going to mention that if we have any points of clarification, we'll ask. Otherwise, we'll go through the presentation and then
as long as it's
get into discussion
to make sure that we understand the point, but
that's right.
Talk about it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
So the second assumption that is sort of built into this is that the assessed values in Lytton will rise by 5%. with the exception of the utilities, which will rise by 9%. And as I said, I just like literally an hour ago was able to pull the 2026 roll totals from the BC assessment website. And in Lytton, so when the assessed values come out, there's two components to it. One component is what they call the non-market change, and that's basically the new construction. That's the new homes that have been built in the village. And as I said, the village provides information to BC assessment that allows them to assign a value to those properties. The other component of it is the market change. So if you were just to look at the 2026 totals in Lytton, it appears that the assessed value has increased 30.9%. Of that, 23% of it is new construction, and the actual market change in Lytton is 7.8%. So you may hear news reports. I know that there's been some circulating already that are saying that property values in Lytton are up 30%. That's a little bit misleading because, as I said, 23% of it is brand new homes or brand new construction that wasn't on the assessment roll last year. Okay, so in this presentation, because I prepared it before I had this report, I've assumed the assessed values rose 5%. The actual number is 7.8%. For purposes of today's discussion, that difference doesn't matter because we're just talking about concepts. We're not talking about the actual specific numbers. Okay, so, and then again, assumed for this new construction that's added to the roll, 4.1 million in residential, 2.3 million in business. As it turns out, based on the report from BC Assessment, the residential number is actually 6.5 million and the business number is 1.2 million. So those numbers, but again, this is just to have the discussion today about the various concepts. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, everyone, we've been here before. This is our 2024, 2025 property taxes where we ended up. We have essentially 4 classes of properties in Lytton. Class 1 residential, class 2 is utilities, class 4 is major industry, and class 6 is business and other. So the only property that's in major industry is the Aspen Planers Mill, south of town. The utilities, that picks up all of the TELUS and all of those types of organizations that own pieces of property around town. Residential, of course, is as it sounds, and business and other kind of captures everything else.
Clarification.
Toss.
Is the airport property an R1 zone, or what is that zoned? Is it industrial? And does it have any improvements assessed by BC Assessment? And are we able to?
I haven't looked at the role in detail for now, so I'd have to look into that and see what that property is valued at. It's possible that it has a combination. Some properties are a combination of classes. They have residential and commercial assessed values, but I'd have to look into it to find out.
So that was a question, sort of an addition to
So it should be at the
clarify
end?
this. So later or
Okay.
in future, because we're early in the process. This is all concept, right?
Great, thank you. I'll
Yeah.
get more clarification later.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just making a note. Just give me a second.
Yeah, my concern is making sure that we get some revenue for the additions on that property.
And we can go to the next slide, please, Lisa. So looking at the 2026 budget and the amount that we need to raise, and then looking at, again, just some preliminary assessment values and an assumed market increase, I looked at sort of 3 options that could be explored as ways to raise the property taxes, or sorry, raise the revenue that is required. So in the past couple of years, as we were kind of in the rebuilding and recovery stage, we just targeted a 6% increase in revenue. And then we kind of split that across the various classes, and that was the amount of additional revenue that we raised. If we were to do that for 2026, it would generate an additional $29,525. So that's quite a bit below the amount that That's additional revenue above the taxes from previous years. And so, that would leave us with a shortfall of approximately $90,000 to what we need to raise. I think that we all understand that concept fairly well because we've done it the last couple of years. Another option would be to maintain a consistent mill rate to 2025. So what would happen in this instance is all of the properties that are added new to the assessment roll, the total revenue generated from them would be incremental to the village. In the past, when we have targeted a revenue number, as the assessment value has increased, the property tax rate has decreased, so that in total, the village received the percentage of revenue incremental to the prior year, but not necessarily the incremental revenue in total from new property. So let me give an example. So, for example, say there's a house in town that's assessed at $100,000, and there's a new house in town that's built for $1 million. If we target the revenue piece, we're going to add those two assessed values together, 1.1 million, and then we're going to decrease the rate to generate 6% more revenue than we generated on only 100,000 the year before. Mm-hmm. If we were to take the $100,000 property and charge it the same rate as last year, and then take the $1 million property and charge it the same rate as last year, all of that tax revenue on the $1 million property would be incremental to the village. New revenue that we didn't have in the past. So no impact on the existing property owners, no increase for them, no decrease either, but the new revenue would come to the village as incremental. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
What do you mean by incremental, Diane? Sorry.
Additional, new revenue that never had before.
Additional.
So
okay.
If we're looking for additional revenue to close the gap on our budget, this would be a way that the current property owners wouldn't be paying more, except for the change in their assessment, right? If their assessment goes up, they would pay more. But if their assessment goes down, they would pay less. But the new property owners would be paying the same tax rate as the previous owners did, as the original owners did the year before. And that would all be new revenue to the village.
So let me see if I understand. So we're looking at option number 2. So if we keep the same mill rate that we had last year, the new builds that have been built this past year would pay more, and the people that already have their house pre-2025 would maintain the same,
would pay the same
tax rate.
Okay. Yeah, so the new houses wouldn't pay more, but they would pay what the existing are paying, right? Because everybody pays the same rate. There's only one tax rate for the whole residential class.
But because they'd
have a lot
valued
more
assessment. The amount they're actually writing a check for when they pay their taxes is more.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because their assessment has gone up so much because of the value of their construction.
Okay.
So that's option 2, and we can discuss this more. I have another example coming up, and we'll look at some actual numbers. And then the other option is to increase the mill rate or the tax rate as much as we need to generate the additional, the 128,453. That's the number that we need to raise over and above last year's taxes that we raised, right? So in order to make up to that 518,000 budget number that we're targeting. So, council could decide to increase the rates as much as you need to in order to close that gap. Now, in all of these options, the counter to it is, if you were to choose option 1 and generate an additional 29,000, then you transfer from your general reserve to cover the rest. If you do option 2, same thing. You raise 53,000 and you transfer from the general reserve to cover the rest. And in option 3, you'd have no transfer from the general reserve. You could also elect a rate in between that had a different number. We could run 1,000 scenarios. It's just moving towards having a tax rate that actually funds the operations of the village.
Yeah.
Moving in that direction. You can go to the next slide for a second, Lisa, please. So what I tried to do here was illustrate how these options would impact 2 different properties. So the first one is a property up on Ponderosa. That is their actual 2025 assessment and the 2025 tax rate. And so their village taxes in 2025 were $580.66. So if we were to increase their assessed value by 5%, which I said earlier is one of our assumptions, under the 6% increase in revenue option 1, the mill rate would actually go down to 2.246, and they would pay $520.71. If we were to have no change in the mill rate with their increased assessment value, they would pay $609.69. And if we were to increase the mill rate as much as we need to in order to completely close that gap, they would pay $878.55. So this is one property on Ponderosa. Below that, I just picked a $500,000 property because we know that a lot of the new construction, is going to be assessed based on their construction costs right off the bat. And so, they're higher than some of the older properties in the village. But if we had an assessed value of $500,000 in 2025, they would pay taxes of $1,314. In 2026, if we were to increase to 6% revenue, they would pay $1,179. Again, it would go down because the tax rate goes down. In 2026, with no change in the mill rate, they would pay $1,380. And if we were to try to completely close the gap, they would pay $1,989. So you can see the different impact on an individual property, because it's one thing to talk about the numbers in total, but then when you get down to talk about what it means to actual individual people, you look at some of these, and then, if we were to increase the mill rate to the full amount, the far column on the right, I would not say that the taxes we collect on behalf of others would still equal that same amount, because that tax rate would be a big jump, and the amount but it would be close. So the person with the $500,000 property would be paying probably $3,500, $4,000 in property tax a year. Without
Councillor Toss has a question.
So yeah, just to reiterate what you just said, Diane, so I understand that 1989 in the closing the gap example with the $500,000 build, you would anticipate with the additional taxes collected that it's going to be closer to 3,000 plus?
Yeah.
Thank you. And the taxes collected on behalf of others, they're proportionate to the value of the home as well?
Not necessarily. They're actually all done on different bases. So they're not all done on the same.
Yeah. Summary just.
Councillor Lightfoot, do you have a question? Yeah.
I can't see how to raise my hand, but I just think it's kind of somewhat relevant that in the information we were given that in 24, the example on Ponderosa was $673.84, which means, in 25, they went down $90. So I'm just And just think that's a relevant point that we need to consider, that last year perhaps was a dip over historical tax rates.
Yeah.
Does Diane, do you have any comment?
And that's because our last year our assessment increased significantly because we had a lot of new properties come on that weren't there before, and we targeted a 6% increase in revenue. So when you just focus on the revenue number, the challenge with that is that it's fine if it's all the same property group, but
Mhm.
when there's new properties added, the effect of those drops the rate for everybody,
Okay.
which is why we saw the rate go down from 24 to 25. And it would go down again in 26 if we stuck with that methodology. Now, I think, when we were still early in the rebuilding and the recovery, I think that was an appropriate approach because, we didn't want to be hitting people too hard as they were trying to kind of get things back together, whether they had lost their property or not, because everybody was significantly impacted. So, but I think now it's sort of time to, like I said, sort of turn our mind to just moving in the direction potentially of closing that gap. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is as additional properties are built and more assessed value is added, it seems plausible that in the future, the rate will come back down because the cost to run the village doesn't continue to climb as the new properties are added. So much of our budget is fixed costs. It doesn't matter if we have one house or 50 houses. We still need to have a corporate officer. Or if we have one house, and so as more properties are added, but costs don't increase, they'll increase some, but they probably won't increase at the rate of the new property, of the new construction.
Yeah.
The rates would like, we're kind of in a funny place right now because we have, we need all the services that a village typically delivers, but we have a very small group paying for that at this time.
Yeah.
Councillor Toss?
Where was I? As more properties are added, I lost my train of thought, I think. Yeah, sorry. Continue.
And then Lisa, can we just flip to the final slide? And this was just for comparison purposes. Now, I know that all the communities are different and everybody has different levels of service and that type of thing, but I just wanted to provide some examples for council of some of the surrounding properties and what their tax rates are in these various categories. So you can see in the residential category, the Lytton tax rate is quite a bit below all the others, and even quite a bit below the lowest of all the others. The utilities, as I mentioned in the report, I haven't actually said it in the presentation, but there's a provincial restriction on the utility rate that it's maxed at 40. And you can see that many municipalities target that number of 40 for utilities. Major industry, like I said, we only have one taxpayer in that category. Cache Creek don't have any, Ashcroft don't have any. Lillooet and Merritt have significantly different rates from us. And then in the business and other, again, our rate is quite a bit lower than surrounding communities. That can be beneficial as a strategy to attract business. Because then that's the final thing I'll say, with the exception of the utilities, council is able to shift the tax burden around as well. We do have, there are some provincial regulations around ratios of one tax rate to another, but there is potential to consider something like that if council was interested.
Councillor Toss? Yeah, just I did take a moment to look up the airport assessments for 2026. There was a 253% on one property. It went to 767,000, and the other side of the airport property was almost at 3 million from 300,000. And that's land, buildings, and upgrades. So I'm anticipating some tax revenue from that as well, I'm hoping.
Okay,
So
so,
that came to like, just shy of 4 million.
so do you have more slides there,
No,
Chairmember
no,
Cap?
that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Lightfoot, did you have a clarification question or?
I'm just, you know, I should know this, but I'm drawing a blank. Where do the rail lines, does their contribution come in? Is that a utility or is that just an arbitrary amount they give us? I know it's fluctuated over the years.
hmm
I'm just
And they own a bunch of different property around town, which is assessed as either residential or business, depending on how it's zoned. For the actual rail line itself, yeah, I'd have to look that up because I can't remember. There's specific rules that relate to bridges and railway bridges. And there's a number of them in the province that are listed specifically, with Lytton being one of them.
I
So-
vaguely recall a number of years ago that they made some comment that their tonnage had lowered significantly and they were going to pay us less. But I don't know if it's one of those, we'll pay you what we think we owe you, or
I don't think it's one of those. I think that's BC Hydro. Um, but I'll have to look into that. I have some information about the railway, but probably not the comprehensive picture. So let me look into that and get more information.
and my second question was north of the heavy industry on our zone map, we do have light industry, and I'm not sure. I know that property transferred. I'm not sure if that's the designated use. But and it's a small piece of property, and I think the highways yard would be probably in that light industry category also.
We don't have anything on our assessed values as light industry.
Okay.
It may be something that's provincially exempt as well.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I just
Councillor Toss?
Yeah, sorry, just my sort of a note of concern when you mentioned, Diane, that as more properties are added, that it's potentially that our tax rate could actually go down, not rate, but our tax total may come down if there were more properties added.
Our tax rate would go down.
But we're not taking into account this sort of gap between what's going to happen in 3 years with our new builds. So we can't really gauge our operations at this point until we know what we built and what it costs, right? So our tax rate is definitely volatile, to say the least, as we go forward, correct?
There's a lot of unknowns.
Thank you.
Yeah,
But I think
for
I think it's worth considering at this point, though, that this is not necessarily a consistent growth or a predictable rate at this point. Yeah.
Correct.
And I would say that even, what she's presented here, as she mentioned, this is concept.
Yeah.
This is not final numbers at all. That's still yet to come.
And part of our process is that I think it's the beginning of February, we typically bring a report to council seeking budget direction. And so that's when the council has the opportunity to request that staff go away and prepare a budget with, and give some parameter around the property taxes. And I guess, what we're hoping for is that we can have some discussion and get some indication of where council would like to go with that, so that when we bring that budget direction report forward, it addresses what you're looking for.
So are we to expect that report, Diane? Is there going to be a report of projected operations costs coming concurrently with these builds, or?
I'm sorry, Jen, what was that again?
Will we be receiving a report? Like I kind of thought that these reports that are coming for the revenues and the expenditures would also be inclusive of these new builds. That was for my concern, the 5-year outlook. And I know we're working on 2026, and this is our immediate goal here to get through this information today. But will we be getting, or what will we be getting in the future, and when, regarding our new builds?
Yeah, I guess once we have an approved schematic design and we know how many rooms are in the building and what their function is, and things like that, we'd be able to put together a more comprehensive business model. I think we could do a number of scenarios now, but without that information, it's kind of hard to know. Are we renting out 2 rooms or 3 rooms, or do we have 10 apartments? Do we have 12 apartments? Like all those factors. So until we kind of know the physical space, which we will, which will be coming through within the next sort of month, then we'll be in a position to do some projections on those buildings.
So back to the 3 scenarios. I wonder, sorry, Councillor Lightfoot, did you have something?
I just wanted to make a comment that 20 hindsight being what it is, part of the reason we need to generate so much money this year is because of the election and the $80,000 price tag on that. So ideally that $20,000 a year every year for 4 years will negate that. So if we didn't have that, I'll take 60 off, right? We would only be short $68,000 in a regular year if we're putting 20 in and not having it all lumped up on top of us. But I was just I'm kind of drawing a blank where the BC assessment says we've increased our assets by 6.5 mil. That seems to me like it should generate a lot more money than I'm hearing. But, I don't have the full understanding yet, so.
Yeah. So, $4 million of residential construction based on last year's tax rate will generate $10,000. It's like, it's 4 million divided by 1,000 times 2.6298. So yeah, 10,519. It doesn't, like, it takes a lot of assessment, right? To generate a lot of revenue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we could, do you think we maybe bring up that slide that shows the 3 options, and maybe we have some discussion around our thoughts, pros and cons on it, and have more of a discussion from council. What do you think of that?
Lisa, could you bring up that slide? I think it's the 3rd last one.
Yeah.
Is this the correct one?
Yeah, that's correct.
And just a quick, the first one, if I'm correct, it's keeping it the same, which is increasing the tax revenue by 6%. Second one is the sort of the 2 levels where you have the homes that are new and then the homes that survived the fire. And then the last one, to increase enough, and the first 2 taking from reserves for any shortfall. And then the third one is to just go gangbusters and collect all the money we need to make sure we're covered, which would then increase significantly for everybody. Is that kind of in a nutshell the three options that are presented here?
That's a good summary.
Yeah, it's very, very general, just a reminder. But I just wonder whether we can kind of go around the room and maybe just share some thoughts on
What we're seeing?
What you're seeing and what, like I said, because I look at it and there's pros and cons on each one, right? Would anyone like to start? Councillor McCann.
I want to start by asking Councillor Lightfoot, back in the day, when you were faced with this kind of a scenario, were you faced with this kind of a scenario? Or was it basically the mill rate determined the amount, like the number 3 was the way it went? Or did you have this kind of discussion where you were trying to figure out how you're going to raise? Because I'm guessing that back in the day, the taxes didn't cover the expenses then either. I'm just guessing, I don't know.
That's a good guess.
Well, as Diane pointed out, it needs to balance. Your revenues have to equal your expenditures. So that was consideration.
I'm just wondering
So,
what.
yeah, it's just part of the challenge. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But we'd be really cheap on a lot of things. And I think, we're pretty frugal as an operation right now. There's not a lot of fat on our books. The challenge is we had a stable assessment year after year after year. That's our challenge in this situation, is that we don't know how much assessment we're going to have next year or 3 years from now. If I can just voice my opinion, I like option 2. And if we didn't have the $80,000 election bill tacked on to this year, we would be pretty much balanced. Actually, we'd have a little, say 60. We're short 128. If we were putting 20 away for an election and we had that other 60 taken off, we only need 68,000. So we're pretty close to balancing, except for that, the damn election issue. Oh, sorry, excuse my English.
Darn.
Mhm.
But I tend to think 2 is probably the best option. That's just my position at this point. I'm willing to be swayed if other people have other.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Is something could jump out at us, but as time goes on, because as I said, this is a process, right? We may change our minds. Councillor Michelle, do you have any thoughts on these 3 options? And
Sure. Do we know what the final we don't have final numbers for our actual assessments, right? Like, I know there was probably
Preliminary.
five properties that were assessed at like 200,000 because they were in the midst of building. Like, is that going to affect very much if they come in at 500, 600,000?
And for options?
I mean, I guess at this point, we have the preliminary roll numbers, and in the past 3 years since I've been here, the final roll has always been identical to the preliminary roll. So, this one includes 6,551,000 of new construction for residential. I don't have the breakdown of the actual properties, but I would say it's not likely. Those numbers aren't likely to change.
Mhm.
If anything, it's other properties where people will challenge their assessment.
Okay. I guess I'm kind of leaning towards number two, but I don't know.
yeah,
It's just with the like the school and the police and those taxes, so like for mine, for example, last year were almost $4,000 before the homeowners grant, whereas before the fire it was about 1,600. So I'm just thinking, like, it's going to be a lot for a lot of people, especially after coming back 4 years later and not paying a couple $100. So I don't know. I'd want to see more concrete numbers first, but I know that's not really an option either, because people, it's January, they can appeal their taxes, right, or their assessments. So then we have to wait.
yeah. CIO Momberket?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in to say we won't have the final roll till the end of March, but we're actually not making any decision until sometime into April. It will be. This is really we're just starting the discussion. If council's requests that staff prepare a budget based on option 2, and we go away and we do that and we bring it forward for approval, and council says nope, we're not approving that, reduce everything, like, there's lots of opportunities to continue to consider. And as numbers become more certain, particularly our own expenses, because as we discussed on December the 2nd, that was very, very preliminary and maybe even too light. So we might need to add some expenses to, so there's still lots of opportunity. I don't want anyone to think that, we're going to run away with this after today. It's just, so I just offer that up.
Yeah, I just thought if we went around the table and just to get an idea what other people are thinking, right?
I do have something. I have a couple things. One is, I don't pay taxes for the Village of Lytton, and I never have. And so for me, this is all just understanding how this must be for someone else. But nonetheless, it does seem to me that the mill rate could move a little closer to reality, that wouldn't be such a really horrible thing to consider. That, it might be just the way you do business. I'm not sure, but to me, that sounds like a reasonable assumption, is to take a second look at that mill rate and say, well, what would happen if it went up by this much and if it went by that much? The other thing that jumps out at me is from Councillor Lightfoot's conversation about the election costs, is to consider maybe taking some of that expense from some reserve. So like you were saying, a combination of things. So not taking the entire amount left out of a reserve for number 1 or 2. Both those totals would require money coming from a reserve to pay the balance. Well, I would suggest we maybe consider some of the 80,000 total for election to come out of a reserve somewhere that makes sense to help defray that particular cost this year, and to make it a little closer to an actual budget reflecting costs. So those are my two.
Yeah.
Amen.
Counselor?
I'm just getting ready for the comments here. Go ahead. This, for me, I'm more concerned about the 27, 28, 29 going forward. So when I look at option 3 and the rate of 8, and it's going to be tough on our residents if we were to go there, in addition to the other taxes to be collected. However, to Councillor McCann's point, we have to be realistic on paying our expenses, and our residents, property owners, taxpayers are going to have to get used to, especially if we are going to have increased operational costs as we're finishing these buildings. They're going to have to get used to paying more, because it's not going to go down, our operational costs. That's my first point. So I'm actually in favor of 3, because as I think one of our governance specialists said, if you can't afford that rate, you can't afford to live anywhere, kind of thing. Like our taxes are still quite low. The other thing, if you wouldn't mind, Lisa, going back a few slides to the total business, the one where we have where we had the business and light industry is 3 million. Where was that? Because I think when I just looked up the airport, I don't think that's included, and they've labeled themselves on BC Assessment as a motel and auto court. So it's actually a business, and I don't know that they have a business license with us, but their total assessed value is 3,500,000. So if that's in addition to the mill, I think we're missing that number.
Yeah, and again, these are
But just so that we know,
examples, right? They're just
there is more assessed value than I think.
And there will be changes coming. Yeah.
That this is a draft, but it is worth mentioning that looks like it's been overlooked. Does that sound right, Diane?
I definitely think it needs looking into, for sure, to kind of
It
figure
went
out.
up
But I need to look and
788%.
see where it is included. You know what I mean? It's included somewhere. It's just a matter of where.
Okay.
But it might not be in the right class.
But it's 3.4 million, so it must be, maybe it's in class 1. Yeah,
It
but
could
it's a
be in
business.
class 1. It could be in
Yeah.
class 1. I'm not sure. So I'll have to look.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of 3. I'm in favor of sticking it to the taxpayer, because they're going to be stuck at 2 in the next decade.
Well,
Unfortunately.
yeah, and my opinion is, at first I went no way for number 3, because I just thought it's such a hit. It's such an incredible hit. But, I listening to what Councillor McCann said and what Councillor Lightfoot said, we have that responsibility to make sure that that we balance this budget, right? So we have to, whatever the budget ends up being. So maybe it's a combination of things. I just to increase the mill rate so that we generate that much, for number 3 is just too big of a hit for me. But maybe it's increased to something we can swallow.
Incremental.
Yeah, that we can swallow, right? And that we think our taxpayers can, I don't know, manage is the word, but support.
Right.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Because it is a challenge. This
Mhm.
isn't simple. Yes, Councillor Thomas.
Is there any instances, CAO Membercat, where this question is put to residents in like a sort of a referendum type style? Because in the end, it would be nice to hear from our residents how they feel about this, or property taxpayers, I should say.
I'm
I know
not
that
aware
they're
of
here, they're
anything.
invited to this meeting and they can speak, but
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything like that. I don't know, Corporate Officer Storoshenko, have you ever heard of anything like that?
No, I haven't. And again, if you do like a referendum, it's quite expensive.
Right,
So
yeah.
that's just one thing to keep in
sort of
mind.
like maybe an informal like request on our social media with Melissa, you know,
Well-
hey, we've been discussing this tax rate, please get involved in the discussion.
We do have a public consultation period associated with the whole budget 5-year
Okay.
financial plan period, right? We usually do an in-person presentation event, and then we have an online consultation period that's usually open for about 10 days. So
Okay.
there's lots of opportunity there for sure. And
That's
you know, I
great.
can work with our communications advisor to make sure that it's, you know, really well promoted so that hopefully we can
Palatable
hear
to the
from people.
community
Communicated, yeah.
and palatable to everybody, right? So we're not going to cause a revolution, whatever.
Yeah, because I think we got one comment last year and we got no comments the 2 years before that. So, you know, it is an opportunity for people to share how they feel about it.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, Councillor Lightfoot.
Okay, I said I was willing to be persuaded, and so, you know, I like option 2, but I also see, I like Councillor McCann's suggestion that some of the election expense is taken out of revenues or out of,
Reserve.
yeah,
Yeah.
out of our savings. And when I looked at the taxes, the Ponderosa example, you know, actually in 25 they were charged less. So if it could be increased a little bit, not the full amount to cover the whole 128,000, but you know, just to tweak it a little bit, I think that would be interesting numbers to review.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the prior year was 2.6298, the maximum is 3.7895. Maybe it's, what does it look like at 3.1 or
Right.
3.2? And then it's somewhere in the middle, like, you know, moving, like I said, in the direction. But maybe, and then the counter to that is, you know, do an actual specific transfer from the reserve for the election, or, you know, for
Yes.
something specific, so that because I think it's important to, you know, set a bit of a, you know, further to Councillor Toss's view that, you know, like we do need to kind of get on a bit of a program of paying for, you know, what we have. Like there is an expectation, you know, and I think, yeah, so you know, that does need to get incorporated at some point, whether it's this year or next year or the year after, you know, but moving in the
Can I
direction.
make a comment? If, you know, I'd like to qualify my comments about, you know, I wish I hadn't said stick it to the taxpayer, but the taxpayer had to understand that these costs need to be covered. But I think with that, I think if we're going to make that increase, whatever we decide on, palatable to a taxpayer, they are going to have to see more tangible village amenities, whether it be their sidewalk fixed, whether it be park, whether it be, so if you're going to get an increase in your taxes, you're going to want to see something for it. So I'm just hoping that we can sort of work towards helping our residents make their homes more, you know, like I say, accessible, sidewalks, lights, things like that, because they are our number one asset, are the people that have vested in this community. So I hope they see something if there is an increase.
Councillor Lightfoot.
Just trying to increase my knowledge base. I'm curious, the homeowners grant, is that is that capped at a certain amount, or is it a percentage of the assessment? How does that work? Does anyone in our group understand that?
Melissa?
Melissa.
It's a set amount, isn't it? 860
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
something dollars.
Okay,
It's a set amount.
okay, thanks.
Good. Okay, are there any other comments regarding these options? No. So that's, I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the presentation and all of the detail. When I first looked at the report in my package, and I actually had to read it a few times and make myself notes and go on YouTube a couple of times to look things up so I understood them better. But really appreciate this and this meeting, because I think it's going to really help us as we move forward in this process. Diane?
Mayor O'Connor, I just wanted to say that we did look at the property taxes today. When I started out preparing this, I was also including water and sewer and user rates associated with those. But I started to get just a bit too many numbers and too much. So I decided to limit this discussion to the property taxes and was wondering if we would be able to set another committee of the whole meeting, potentially in 2 weeks' time, to look at the sewer and water budgets and resulting fees from that, because those are two other areas that we need to make sure are self-funding. And we could wait till the February meeting, but I'd like to have the information, have a bit of opportunity to discuss it with council prior to that, if that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I felt this was quite a good conversation, and we've been at it an hour. I would be in support of that. Councillor McCann?
I'll just share, CO Monbriquette, that when I was going through this, admitting my own ignorance of not being a taxpayer, that I had to remind myself that this was only a part of what a person pays in Lytton. There's also the sewer and water. And then I started having questions about that, like, oh, well, does everyone pay the same? Is there any kind of differences? And I understand that we have to recover the cost for those things. But yes, I would appreciate that conversation just to clarify some of my questions that I already have rumbling around about water and sewer.
So we'd be looking at, you're saying 2 weeks, Thursday, the 15th. Is that what we're proposing? Sorry, Councillor Toss.
That's okay, I'll finish it after.
Or today is actually the Tuesday, so it would be Tuesday the 20th.
I don't even know what day of the week it is. The 20th. The 20th. Does that
Thursday
work for
the 15th
everybody?
works for me, but yeah.
I think so, yeah.
The 20th worked for everyone at 11 o'clock. We did the same thing. Okay. Let's do that. And with the focus on the utilities, water and
1
sewer.
o'clock, you said?
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock. I'll be coming in remotely because I'll be in Tsawwassen, but I will be there.
Okay.
May I get a formal motion for that? So just, I can word it, but if we can
Sure,
just get a formal
Councillor
motion.
Lightfoot is making the motion.
Okay,
Seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. All those in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Carried.
wonderful.
Councillor
Thank you.
Toss.
Comment on the conversation around sewer and water and utilities. I spoke to a good old friend of mine who does the revenue for the city corporation of Delta, and we talked about trailers a little bit. And their position in Delta is if you have a motorhome or a fifth wheel or a trailer on a vacant lot, doesn't matter if you're hooked up, doesn't matter if you're there, you are, as soon as somebody, like a bylaw inspector or somebody flags that there's a chattel or whatever they call it, a temporary dwelling on that property, they get taxed on that. The utilities get charged. So on properties, I would be in favor of any property that has a trailer on it paying utilities, and that is consistent with other municipalities. And that could potentially bring in some revenue. So
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that.
yeah, but I'm
would
just
be
putting it out
brought
there so
before
that it would be
us,
something
from
that we
staff.
could put, or that you could at least consider at that discussion, or we can put forward at that 2 weeks.
Perfect. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, Councillor McCann. Oh,
So there was a motion that council received the property tax report.
I apologize. We need a motion to receive this report today. Thank you, Councillor Toss. Seconder, Councillor Lightfoot. All those in favor? Carried. Now the motion to adjourn, and Councillor McCann has done that. Seconded by Councillor Toss. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we are finished this committee of the whole meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I figured out
Kathy.
when everyone gets off, I'll mention.
Thank you, everyone. So that concludes the committee of the whole meeting for January 6th. Thank you for attending and have a great day.